You step onto the first tee. It's a Saturday morning, and your hands know the grip before your mind tells them to. 10 years ago, that same swing sent the ball toward the right center of the fairway, a high draw that carried 250 yards and ran out another 20. You remember the feeling, the compression, the silence, that split second when the ball hangs before it decides to fly. Now you stand over the same tee box. Your swing feels identical. The ball refuses to cooperate. A weak fade that peaks at 60 feet, then falls. The carry is 190 if you're generous. The roll, if the fairway is dry, pushes it to 210. You walk to the cart thinking, maybe it's age. But that's the wrong answer. There are 4 driver loft mistakes senior golfers make every single season. Each one costs you distance you still have, if you knew where to find it. By the end of this video, you'll know which loft is wasting your best swing. And that Saturday morning feeling? You can have it back. Here's the first mistake. It's the most common, the most invisible, and the most destructive. It starts with a word you've heard 100 times. Loft to launch trade-off.
The key metrics here
in a fitting bay, with a TrackMan reading out launch angle and spin, a fitter will tell you that dropping loft reduces spin and increases ball speed. That is true for a 25-year-old with 110 mile/hour swing speed. For a golfer over 55, whose swing speed sits between 78 and 88 miles per hour, that trade-off becomes a trap. Too low on the face plus too low of a loft equals a knuckleball. The ball never gets high enough to carry. It lands at the front of the green's apron with no spin and rolls over the back. The TrackMan says you gain 2 miles per hour of ball speed. The course says you lost 15 yards of effective distance. Think about what that means. A senior golfer's swing naturally loses rotational speed over time. The average 60-year-old male golfer swings the driver at roughly 82 miles per hour.
At 82 miles per hour,
at that speed, the optimal launch angle is between 15 and 18 degrees. A standard 10.5-degree driver struck in the center of the face launches the ball somewhere between 11 and 13 degrees. That's 4 degrees too low.
As you can
4
see
degrees
here,
of lost apex equals 50 to 80 feet of lost peak height. And without peak height, the ball cannot hold its line against the wind or land softly. You can lose 23% of your total distance before the ball ever hits the ground. That 23% of lost distance before the ball even hits the ground is the kind of number that should stop you mid-swing. If you want to catch every hidden leak like this one, subscribe so you don't miss the second mistake, which is even more personal. And in the comments, type your current driver loft. I want to see how many of us are still playing a loft that belongs to a younger version of ourselves. Now we reach the second mistake. It has a name, the "I used to hit a 9.5 trap." You bought your first driver in the mid-90s. It was 9.5 degrees, maybe 10, and you hit it 280 yards into a headwind. That driver is probably sitting in your garage, or you replaced it with a new model that carries the same loft spec because you could not let go of the memory. The problem is biological, not emotional. Your swing speed at 45 was 88 miles per hour. At 60, it is 78. The 9.5-degree head that used to launch at 13 degrees now launches at 10. The spin drops below 2,000 RPM. The ball falls out of the air like a dying duck. The MyGolfSpy 2024 driver test data across 123 senior testers showed that only 12% of men over 55 retained enough swing speed to benefit from a sub-10-degree driver. 12%. The rest were leaving distance on the table because they refused to add 2 degrees of loft. Jim from Naperville was still trying to launch a 9.5 last spring. His ball flight said otherwise. Every drive started low, turned slightly right, and landed on a dead line at 197 yards. He had been fit 7 years earlier. He bought a new shaft, but kept the same head. The launch monitor at the demo day showed his actual dynamic loft at delivery was 8.8 degrees. His angle of attack was -2. The fitter handed him a 12-degree head set to 12.5 with a slightly heavier shaft. First swing, 228 yards, high draw, 15 yards of roll. Jim's new driver was nearly 3 degrees higher than his old one, and he gained 31 yards. He had been losing the equivalent of 2 clubs into every par 4 for 3 seasons. The third mistake is quieter. It involves spin, which most golfers treat as an enemy. The narrative in golf media has been consistent for 20 years. Lower spin equals longer drives. And that is true, but only inside a narrow envelope. For a senior golfer, spin is not drag. Spin is lift. Think of a commercial airliner. The flaps extend on takeoff, not to slow the plane, but to increase the camber of the wing, generating more lift at lower speed. That is exactly what spin does for a golf ball. At 78 miles per hour of clubhead speed, the ball needs at least 2,300 RPM of backspin to achieve optimal apex height. Below 2,000 RPM, the ball cannot overcome gravity in time to reach its launch window. It climbs slowly, peaks early, and drops steeply. The carry distance collapses. For every degree of loft you drop, spin falls roughly 250 RPM. If you go from 11 degrees to 9 degrees, you just lost 500 RPM. At 78 miles per hour, that is the difference between a ball that carries 220 yards and one that carries 195. The older you get, the more spin matters. But the fitting industry built its standard on 30-year-old athletes swinging at 110. A senior golfer buying a low-spin driver, head marketed for maximum distance, is buying a head that actively fights their biology. The correct approach is the opposite. You want a driver head that produces at least 2,500 RPM of spin, preferably 2,700, with a launch angle above 15 degrees. That combination transforms the ball flight from a weak fall into a parabolic arc that lands at a shallower angle and rolls out. The ball carries further in the air, and it rolls further on the ground. Total distance increases 14 to 18% in independent testing by Golf Digest's 2023 Senior Equipment Panel. The spin-lift relationship is one of those facts that the fitting industry buries because it complicates the sales pitch. If you're still here, you're the kind of golfer who wants the truth, not the marketing. And that's exactly what this channel delivers. Subscribe to stay ahead of the curve. And in the comments, write the spin number your launch monitor showed last time. Or, if you've never been measured, just say never measured. Now we arrive at the fourth mistake. It is the most personal and the most painful. It is static fitting. You got fit once, maybe 3 years ago, maybe 6. The fitter measured your swing speed, your path, your attack angle, your spin numbers. He sold you a head, a shaft, a loft setting. You paid a premium for that session. Then, you walked away and treated those numbers as permanent. But your body is not a fixed object. 1 year of reduced flexibility, a shoulder injury, a change in posture as your lower back stiffens. Each of these lowers your effective swing speed and changes your delivery. The 12-degree driver that fits you at 65 might be too weak at 67. Your swing speed has dropped 5 miles per hour. That extra half degree of loft that was optimal is now insufficient because your attack angle has weakened by 1 degree. The player who refuses to adjust is the player who leaves 20 yards on the tee. Every year, the PGA Senior Tour players are fitted mid-season. They do not play the same driver through an entire season. They adjust loft, face angle, and shaft weight to account for fatigue, weather, and aging. The amateur senior golfer, by contrast, plays the same head for 4 years and assumes the problem is their swing. In many cases, it is not. The problem is the mismatch between the equipment's assumption and the body's reality. A real-world example, a 62-year-old golfer from Scottsdale, Arizona, played a 10.5-degree driver for 3 seasons. His swing speed dropped from 86 to 81 over that period. He noticed his ball flight fell lower and his misses turned into pulls. He had it checked. his face angle at impact had shifted from neutral to 2 degrees closed. The effective loft of his driver at delivery was now 8 degrees. He replaced the head with a 12-degree model and added half an inch of shaft length. The pulls disappeared. The ball flight returned to a high fade. He gained 22 yards on his first round, 22 yards from a simple head change, no swing change, no lessons. If this resonates with you, there's a lot more where this came from. Link in the description. In the comments, write that exact phrase if you've ever had a fitting that felt like it was for a different golfer. That 8-degree adjustment between your ears, that's the real breakthrough. If the equipment industry's narrative has been lying to you, imagine what other assumptions are costing you strokes. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next video, where we'll show you how the lie angle is quietly stealing your fairways. And in the comments, answer this. How many years have you been playing the same driver head? I'll bet it's more than 2. The blueprint is simple. 4 moves. 1. Get on a launch monitor with a fitter who understands senior swings. Do not accept a recommendation based on your previous fitting. Start fresh. 2. Demand a head between 11 and 13 degrees of static loft, with the option to adjust up or down by 1 degree. 3. Target a spin window of 2500 to 2800 RPM measured on center strikes. If the fitter tries to sell you a low spin head, ask why. 4. Schedule a refit every 18 months, not 4 years. Your swing is changing faster than you feel it. In the next video, we will pull apart the lie angle, the one number almost every senior golfer ignores that costs them a fairway every round. You will find out why your miss left means the club is working against you at address. Your swing is not broken. Your body is not failing. The driver in your hands is lying to you about what you are capable of. Every time you stand over the ball and feel that familiar doubt, it is not a limitation of age. It is a limitation of information. The equipment industry has spent decades convincing you that distance comes from speed. But for the senior golfer, distance comes from understanding. Once you know that a 12-degree head with 2700 RPM of spin and a launch angle above 15 degrees generates more total yards than a 9.5-degree head ever could, the game changes. The Saturday morning walk to the cart becomes a walk of anticipation again. You look down at the ball and you know, before you even swing, that the ball will fly. And it does. Not because you are younger, because you are smarter. And that knowledge, that 8-degree adjustment between your ears, is worth more yards than any shaft on the market.